Hello and welcome back to another Construct 3 tutorial. In this series of videos, we are going to figure out how to make our little character here jump up, hang on to walls where we can hang, we can drop. We have normal moving around capabilities, but the best feature is jumping up, hanging on that wall, and then being able to climb up and then have all our regular abilities regained after that. And we will design us a short little level so that we can jump around wherever we want to go and climb or drop or do whatever we want. Okay, so pretty cool little effect, I think, or I guess a game mechanic, not really an effect. And just a note that this can be done in the free version of Construct 3. I'm going to exit out of my little preview and start a new project. I'm going to call this Ledge Climb, and I'm going to go with a viewport size of 640 by 360, and then make sure that we are landscape, start with an event sheet, and optimize for pixel art. Make sure you check that box, and let's create this. So for now, I want to make our layout the same size as our preview window here. In our layout properties on the left, I'm going to go down to display, and this viewport size, I'm going to highlight that and just copy it. Control C to copy. And then if you click on the layout itself, we can go into the size, highlight that, and just Control V to paste. That gives us just this area to work with. We will be expanding this later on in another video. Okay, first things first, even though we created the project and we even gave it a name, but it's still not saved, and we want to set that up. So you can click this little file icon, says Save Project, and then you will navigate to where on your device you want to store this file and give it a file name and save it. Okay, I got mine saved. Next thing we're going to do is change how our game is scaled. So right now, this layer 0, if you click on the layer in the properties, you can see background color, and mine is set to this gray color by default. And then there's also this transparent that is unticked. That means this gray box is going to show up when we play it. And if we play it, there's our gray box. And if you notice that there's all this black empty space around it. And if I stretch it, that gray box stays the same size until I stretch it far enough that it scales up like that. So I don't want that. I want it to scale to however far I stretch the window. Click on the layout itself in this, just anywhere on the layout, and go over here to Project Properties under View and scroll all the way to the bottom. And we have this right here under display called full screen mode, and it's automatically set to letterbox integer scale. And that word integer is why it's not scaling to however far we stretch the box. I'm going to change this to just letterbox scale. If we play this now, you see that gray area fills up the whole screen. And if I stretch it, it fills up the screen no matter how far we stretch it. Now we can move on to getting our player sprite into the game. I'm going to stretch some of this out so we can see it better. On the layout, I'm going to double click and scroll down to Sprite and double click that, and then we can click anywhere to insert it. If you have not imported the sprites yet, they are located in the comments section of every video in this series. It is located in a Google Drive that I created just for this channel. You can just click that link and download those sprites, and they are split up into folders, and you can just put those folders anywhere where you can find them. So once you have all those sprites downloaded and put somewhere where you can find them, we're going to come up here to this folder icon, load image from a file. You should have climb, hang, idle, jump, and run. We want the idle for now, so double click, go into the idle folder. There should be only one sprite. Click on that and open. So if we check the size, it should be 24 by 60. Next, we can come over here to the origin tool, and I want it at the bottom of her feet. I found that it looks just slightly more fluid if we place it at 13. I know it's 1 pixel difference, but it actually ended up making a slight bit of visual difference for me. So I'm going to go with an X of 13 and a Y of 60. Then we can name this animation. I'm just going to name it idle and set the speed to 0, no looping, and everything else should be fine. Let's check the bounding box. It's kind of weird. I'm going to right click on one of these nodes and set to bounding box. We'll come in and change this up a little bit later, but this should be good for now. So let's exit out of that. And with this object still selected, I'm going to come up here and rename it player. And while we still have her selected, let's come over here to the properties and edit behaviors. And I want to add a new behavior and scroll down until you find platform. Let's add the platform behavior. Next, we're going to need something for her to interact with. So let's double click on the layout, scroll down to Sprite, and insert anywhere. I'm going to change the size to 16 by 16. And I'm going to find a nice little green color. This is going to be our ground sprite. Let's go over to the image point and make sure that it is in the bottom left. And let's check our bounding box, make sure it covers the whole sprite. Okay, I'm going to exit out of that. With that selected, I'm going to come up here and rename it ground. And if I move it around, it has free range to move wherever it wants. I'm going to make it a little more constricted. So if we click on the layout, just anywhere in an empty space on the layout, in the properties, down in the editor, we have grid size. I'm going to change to 16,16 and turn on snap to grid. And now we can move it around in increments. So I'm just going to place this somewhere about a third or so of the way up, maybe more like a fourth of the way up, and stretch it all the way across the screen. And with our ground object still selected, let's go over into the properties, edit behaviors, add a new behavior, and pick solid. And I'll place our player down here on the ground. And if we play that, using the arrow keys, we can move our player around and jump. Okay. So far, so good. I don't really care for the arrow keys on a keyboard to control our character. So I like to set up WASD. And to do that, we're going to have to access the keyboard as an object. So we can double click on the layout again and scroll all the way towards the bottom. And under input, we have keyboard. Let's insert that. And now we can hop over into the event sheet tab. So let's add an event, go into our keyboard, and on key is down, and let's choose the A key. Hit done. I'm going to add an action to that, go into our player, and when I press the A key, I want to move left. So let's scroll down to our platform behavior, and we want towards the bottom of that section is simulate control, and we want left. Highlight this entire block of code. We can Control C to copy, Control V to paste, and go into this event and change the A to a D, and go into this action and change left to right. All right, let's add another event and go back into our keyboard, and this time I want on key pressed. And that key is going to be the W key. I'm going to use that W key to jump, so let's add an action to that, go into our player, scroll down to our platform behavior, simulate control, and let's choose jump. If we go back into our layout and click on our player, over here in the properties underneath the platform behavior, we have default controls, should automatically be checked. I want to uncheck that. So now the arrow keys will not work. Only what we have set up in the event sheet should work. So let's play that. My arrow keys do nothing. A and D move left and right. W jumps. Looks good. All right. The controls work, but I don't like the movement. So let's change some of these properties. In the platform behavior for our player, I'm going to drop the max speed down to 180. Acceleration, I'm going to drop down to 800. Deceleration, I'm going to come down to 1000. Jump strength, down to 410. And then our gravity, we need to drop down to about 1000. Our max fall speed is going to come way down to 400. Everything else should look like this. Okay, we can play that again real quick. Okay, we have a little bit better movement in my opinion. So I'm happy with this. We'll see how that plays out as we progress through this tutorial. Now that we have these control checks set up, we can control which way our player is facing. So for this check of A is down, we want to mirror that image. So let's add an action to this and go into our player, and I'm going to type in mirror and choose set mirrored, and I want mirrored. And then we can do the same thing down here for D is down when we're pressing right. Let's add an action, go into our player. I'm going to type in mirrored, set mirrored, and this time I'm going to choose not mirrored. That way it will flip the image back the other way. And if we play, now our player faces the direction that we are moving. Okay. Okay, let's head back over to the layout real quick. And this layer 0 is going to be our main layer. I'm going to rename it player, and it's really going to house everything that we make except for the background. But before we create the background layer, let's make sure that this player layer is highlighted, and over in its properties, let's click that transparent. It's all dark behind our player. Okay, back in our layers panel, wherever yours happens to be, I'm sure your layout is a little different looking than mine. That's all right. Everything should still work the same. So in your layers panel, let's right click and add layer to the bottom. And I'm going to name this background. And with that background layer selected, I'm going to come over to the layout and double click and scroll down until I find tiled background. Let's insert that. And I'll just click to insert it. And I'm going to resize this to 64 by 64. And I'll zoom in a little. And I'm going to go into my grid options up here. Configure grid. And I'm going to make it 32 by 32. And if we click on it to make it visible, we now have a guide for what we're going to do next. I want a background that's kind of broken up so we can see better what's going on in the foreground. So I'm going to choose a blue color, and I'm in the HSL tab down here. Make it a little different. So this is what I'm going with, these numbers. You can make yours however you want. I'm going to grab the rectangle tool, and in the top left, I'm going to click and drag down to this center point, and then I will do the same thing down here, make another square in this bottom part, and then with the fill tool, I'll just fill both of those in. So now I can turn this grid off so we don't have those lines there, and I'm going to make this blue color a little different, make it a little lighter. Maybe something like that, and fill in these other two squares. So yours doesn't have to be these colors or like this at all. Okay, I'm going to exit out of that, and I'm going to snap this up in the top left and drag it all the way down to the bottom right. And then if we play that, now we have us a little background. Okay, make sure that your background tile is on your background layer. And if you click on your player, make sure that your player is on the player layer. So back over here in the layers panel, I'm going to lock the background layer. Now we can go back into our player by double clicking to go back into the animations editor. And I am going to come over here into our animations panel and right click and add an animation. I'm going to rename this run, and I'll right click and add another animation and rename this one jump. Okay, let's click on the run animation. And over here on our load image from file, let's go back out to our folder system here and get the run folder, click to go into it, and you should have 6 frames of animation here. I'm going to click on one and shift click on the other, make sure they're all highlighted and open. Click on the origin tool, and let's put that down at the bottom with an X of 13, just like we did the other one. And once you do that, you can come over here to the origin in the image points panel, right click and apply to whole animation. So every frame should have that in the same place. And then our collision box, pretty messed up. Let's right click on one of these nodes and set to bounding box. And then let's right click on that node again and apply to whole animation. So now they're all the same. Okay, let's go over to the jump animation and do the same thing. Go to this folder and find the jump folder. There should be 2 frames in this one. Select both of them, open it. We can set this bounding box and then set it to the whole animation. And then the same thing with our origin point. Let's move it to the bottom, make sure that X is 13 and our Y will be 65 for this one. Then right click on the origin image point and apply to whole animation. So now both frames are set up. Okay, for our jump animation, if you click on the animation over here in the panel, it'll bring up the properties. Make sure that the speed is 0 and no looping set. And then click on our run animation, loop for sure, and I'm going to set a speed of 12. And then if we right click on it, go to preview, there's our animation. All right, let's go ahead and exit out of that. Back over on the event sheet. Now that we have our jump animation in, let's go ahead and add it to our jump event. So in this event, let's add an action, go into our player, and set animation. In between quotation marks, we want our jump animation, and it does have to be in between quotation marks or it won't find it. Okay, we could play that. And we have our idle animation still playing. And when we jump, there's our jump animation. And we haven't told it to do anything else after we set that animation. So when it comes to adding the run animation, I want to make sure that the run animation knows to only play at the right time. If we're in the air, we're not running, right? We're jumping. We're playing that jump animation. The only time that we are running is when we're actually touching ground, right? So Construct 3 has a check for that, and it is called Platform on Floor. So let's add an event and go grab our player and scroll down to our platform behaviors, and there it is on floor. Let's choose that one. I'm going to increase the size of this so we can see it nice and big. So I want to run a couple of different checks for when we're on the floor, because something else that can happen while we're on the floor is the idle state. So both of those animations can take place while we're on the floor. So to check for multiple conditions while we're on the floor, we can create sub-events. Click over here on the side of this and highlight this whole block of code and press B on the keyboard. It gives us a sub-event, and a sub-event is indented from the above event. In this sub-event, we can double-click to go in, and I want to check if we're giving it some input. So let's go into our keyboard, and let's check if key is down, and check for the A. And with this part highlighted, Control-C to copy, Control-V to paste. Now we have 2 conditions in this one block. Let's double-click on the bottom one to go in and change it to D. Now this says if A and D is down, then we can run an action. But I don't want to know if both A and D are down. I want to know if A or D is down. So right-click in this empty space on the left and say Make OR block. So if A or D is down and we're on the floor, that means we're moving, and I want to run that run animation. So let's add an action to this, go get our player, and set animation to run. And that has to be in between quotation marks. Okay, if we play that, there's our idle, there's our jump, and now if we run, it plays the run animation. But we haven't told it to change its animation once we do any of these. So if A or D is down, we play run. Otherwise, I want it to go back to idle. So I'm going to click on this top event here, platform is on floor check, and press B on the keyboard again. That gives us another sub-event that is indented from the platform is on floor, but is flush with the A or D down check. So if we double click on this one, we can go into System and type in else, And that means anything other than A or D down, we're going to go back to idle. So add an action, get our player, set animation, and in between quotation marks, we want idle. Okay. When we stop running, we go back to idle. When we jump, as soon as we land back on the floor, we go to idle. Now there is something I have set up when we imported the jump sprite. There were 2 frames. Here, just that 1 frame is playing while we're jumping. So to check for the jump, we want pretty much the opposite of this whole check. This is on floor. Now I want to check if we're not on the floor. So let's add an event, go in our player, and scroll down and pick that is on floor again. And just highlight this one part and press I on the keyboard, and that'll put that X there. That inverts it and says platform is not on the floor. So now anything that happens under this check will only happen if our player is not touching the floor. So when our player jumps, she puts her hands in the air, and then when she comes back down, we have this other animation. And you see her dress kind of goes down, like the wind is pushing down on it when she jumps up. And then it kind of fluffs it up as she comes down and her hands go back. Her hair is actually a little different as well. So I want this frame to play when she's falling. So in our event sheet, let's highlight this platform is not on floor and press B to get another sub event, and that indents from this check. Double click to go into it, go into our player. Down in our platform behaviors, we have is falling. So I'm actually, with this highlighted, I'm going to press I to invert it. So this says if it's not falling, then I want to play that first animation of jump with our hands in the air, which is animation 0, and the other one is animation 1. So I want 0 for up and 1 for down. So let's add an action to this, go into our player, and set frame to 0. And then if we highlight this whole block of code right here and press X on the keyboard, it gives us an else statement. We did it manually up here. I just used the shortcut down here. So if we are not falling, that means we're moving up, and we play that frame with our hands in the air. Otherwise, that would mean that we are falling. Let's add an action, go into our player, and set the frame to frame 1. Okay, let's play that. We run, we have idle, we jump, and whenever she starts falling down, she plays that falling animation. And everything goes back to idle and resets, and looks like it is working exactly how we want it. Okay, one last thing here. Let's come down here to the bottom in this blank space, right click, and add group. And I'm going to call this player controls. And then we can scroll back up to the top, click on this very first event, and then down at the bottom, this last else statement, we can hold shift and click on that, and it highlights everything in between. And now we can just click on this and drag it into our group. Now we have player controls group, and we are actually done with the player controls group. We won't need to revisit this group anymore. And now that we have the project set up, we have all that stuff out of the way. So I'm going to stop this one right here. Make sure you are saving more often than I remember to, please. And if you're new to this channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Might as well hit that thumbs up button as well while you're there. That's going to do it for this video. I will see you in the next one.